I had lived in my house for 7 years. 7 years is long enough to know a house the way you know a person. I knew the sound the furnace made when it kicked on at 3 in the morning. I knew the specific rattle the kitchen window made when the wind came from the northwest. I knew which stairs squeaked and which ones did not, and I knew the difference between the house settling and the house making noise for other reasons. 7 years. I knew my house. In January I started hearing footsteps. I want to be precise about what I mean. Not thumps, not bangs, not the dramatic sounds of horror movies. Footsteps. The soft, sequential, weight-shifting sound of a person walking on a wooden floor, coming from above my bedroom, where the attic was. The first night I lay awake and listened and told myself it was an animal, a raccoon or a squirrel that had found a gap in a soffit. Animals in attics were common. Animals in attics made sounds. I told myself that. The second night the same sounds came again. I listened more carefully. I had done some research after the first night on animal movement in attics. Raccoons moved in a scrambling, 4-point pattern. Squirrels were fast and light and random. What I was hearing was neither of those things. It was a slow, deliberate, 2-point movement, back and forth, above my bedroom, like a person pacing. I got out of bed. I stood in the hallway and looked at the attic hatch in the ceiling above me, a pull-down hatch with a folding ladder, sealed when closed. There was no light coming through the seal. I stood in my hallway at 2 in the morning and thought about 7 years of knowing this house and whether I had ever heard this sound before. I had not. I called my neighbor Bill, a retired man who had been next door for 20 years and who had a key to my house for emergencies. I know it was 2 in the morning. I called him anyway. He answered. He came over. I told him what I had heard and showed him the hatch. He said we were not going up there that night and that we were going to call the police and let them go up. I said it was probably an animal. He looked at me and said it probably was, but that probably was not the word he wanted to be using at 2 in the morning before he put his head through an attic hatch. He was right. We called the Louisville Metro Police non-emergency line. I described what I had heard, the duration, the character of the sound. 2 officers arrived within 15 minutes. They went up through the hatch with flashlights. What they found was not an animal. In the far corner of the attic, past the HVAC system and past the insulation, in the area above the back bedroom, they found evidence of habitation. A sleeping bag that was not mine, a battery-powered lantern that was not mine, 2 bottles of water, and food wrappers with dates going back 11 days. Someone had been living in my attic for at least 11 days, sleeping above my bedroom, pacing when they could not sleep, while I slept 12 feet below them. The individual was not present when officers searched. They had left through a soffit access point in the back of the attic that opened to the roof, a gap the previous owners had patched improperly and that had worked itself loose, large enough for someone to squeeze through. The officers sealed it temporarily that night. The lead officer said something before he left that I want you to hear. He said I had heard something on day 9 or 10, which meant there were 8 or 9 days of this before the sounds woke me. The sounds that woke me had been louder. Whatever happened on that 9th or 10th night had changed something in how they were moving, maybe comfort, maybe carelessness. But for 8 days before that, nothing. 8 days of someone above my bedroom being careful enough that I did not notice. I went through my attic within the week with a contractor who sealed every gap, every soffit access, every possible point of entry. I also installed an attic sensor, a simple motion detector positioned at the hatch end of the attic that sends an alert to my phone if anything moves up there. I have not received an alert since the sensor was installed. I check the app every night before I go to sleep. Every single night. Because 8 days of not knowing something is 8 days too many. Know what is above your bedroom before it starts pacing. Old houses have smells. I want to acknowledge that because it is the reason I ignored the smell for as long as I did. My house was built in 1923, and it had its own specific old house smells that I had learned over 2 years of living in it. The musty basement smell that came up through the vents in spring, the particular odor of the plaster walls when the humidity climbed in July. I knew my house's smells. In March I noticed something new. Not strong, not dramatic. A faint and persistent organic smell that appeared in the upstairs hallway and concentrated near the attic hatch. I told myself it was the attic. Old attics smelled like old attics, insulation and old wood and decades of accumulated dust. I told myself that for about 2 weeks. Then the smell changed. Still faint, but different. The specific way that organic smells shift over time when the thing producing them is in a process. I pulled down the attic hatch. I did not go up immediately. I stood at the bottom of the folding ladder and pointed a flashlight up into the opening. The attic looked normal. Insulation, old boxes, the back of the chimney stack, the HVAC ducts running along the ridge. I could not see the far corners clearly from the hatch. I went up. I moved carefully on the old floor joists, stepping on the joists and not between them. Near the back of the attic, in the section above the back bedroom, I found the source of the smell. I am not going to describe in graphic detail what I found. I will tell you it was evidence of an animal that had been in my attic, something larger than a small animal that had not survived. But that is not the part of this story that matters, because while I was in that back section looking at the source of the smell, my flashlight swept to the left, and I saw something the smell had not prepared me for. A space had been cleared. In the corner of the attic behind the HVAC unit, someone had moved stored boxes and insulation to create an open area. They had not done it recently. The displaced items had gathered dust in their new positions, suggesting the rearrangement had happened some time ago. In the cleared space, there was a wide wooden plank laid across the joists to create a floor surface, something to sit or lie on without falling through the gaps. There were marks on the underside of the roof decking above the cleared space. Writing. I did not read what the writing said. I went back down through the hatch, called 911, and waited outside my house until officers arrived. The officers went up. They documented the cleared space, the plank, the writing on the roof decking, and photographed everything. The detective told me when he reviewed the case that the writing contained personal information. Observations about the house, about routines in the house, about me. The cleared space had been a watching post. The plank was a platform for someone to stand or crouch on and look through small gaps in the attic floor, where the old plaster ceiling below had cracked and separated over nearly 100 years, down into the rooms below, down into my bedroom. I am going to stop there because I think you understand what I am telling you. The detective said the dust accumulation on the displaced items suggested the cleared space had been created months earlier. The smell brought me up there. Without the smell, he could not say when I would have found it. The smell was the warning. In my case, it was a smell. In other cases, it is a sound, a draft from somewhere there should be no draft, an item moved, a light seen from outside where there should be none. Your house will tell you. It always tells you. Listen to it. When you rent a house, you inherit its history. Every previous tenant, every repair done and not done, every modification made by someone who no longer lives there and whose reasoning you will never know. You inherit all of it. Most of it is fine. Most of it is just the ordinary accumulation of a house that has been lived in by other people. But some of what you inherit when you rent is something the landlord should have addressed and did not, should have disclosed and did not, should have known about and either did not or did. I had been in my rental in Nashville for 8 months when I noticed the access point. I was not looking for it. I was in the upstairs hallway retrieving something from the linen closet when I saw, at the top of the closet wall, a panel. Not the main attic hatch, which was in the hallway ceiling and pulled down in the standard way. This was a secondary panel in the wall of the linen closet, at the top, where the closet met the attic space. A panel with a hinge. A panel that opened inward into the attic. I had been in that linen closet hundreds of times over 8 months. I had not looked at the top of it. I stood carefully on the closet shelf and opened the panel. It opened easily on a hinge that was well maintained. Not stiff, not rusted. Moving smoothly, like a hinge that had been used. Inside was the attic, dark, the back of the main attic insulation visible. I closed the panel and called my landlord. I told him there was a secondary attic access panel in the linen closet that I had not been told about, and that I needed to know about every access point to the attic in this house. He said he was not aware of any secondary panel. I said the hinge was well maintained and the panel opened easily, and that someone had been using it. A long pause. He said he would come by. He came that afternoon. He looked at the panel and looked at the hinge. And then he said, and the way he said it told me something I have thought about many times since, he said he would get that sealed up. Not I have no idea what that is. Not I have never seen that before. Just he would get it sealed up. I called Nashville PD that evening. Not about the landlord, since I had no specific allegation to make. About the panel, about the undisclosed access point, about the maintained hinge on a panel the landlord claimed not to know about. The officer who came looked at the panel, and then went up through the main hatch to look at the attic from above. In the attic, at the internal entry point corresponding to the linen closet panel, the insulation had been pushed back from the area around the panel edge. Pushed back and replaced. Pushed back and replaced in the way of something done repeatedly. Something accessed repeatedly, through a panel the landlord claimed not to know about, with a hinge maintained by someone. I moved out within the week. I broke my lease. The landlord did not challenge it, which told me something. His not challenging it told me something. You have the right to know every access point in your rental home. Every door, every window, every attic hatch. If your lease does not disclose a secondary access point, ask. Before you sign, before you move in, walk the house specifically looking for panels, hatches, and secondary doors. The top of the linen closet wall, the back of built-in cabinets, the utility room, anywhere a panel might exist and not be obvious. Know every way into your home, because someone else may already know about the ones you have not found yet.